evening, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the Community Services Committee on the 11th of January. We'll start with apologies for absence.
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Now, declarations of interest. I think I probably need to declare one in respect of 7.4, the allotments tender, because my wife's got an allotment in Piggott's Hill. On the other hand, it's just a tender specification, so I'll leave that one with you, Carl.
Yeah, Chair. So I think what I'm hearing there is probably a non-pecuniary interest in that sense. If you're happy to declare it in that way.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Councillor Priggin, you're on mute.
Hello, thank you. I've also got an allotment in one of the sites that is actually mentioned for the fencing, Roundwood Lane site.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Any more for any more? No. Okay. Let's move on to item 3, Chairman's report and urgent items. I don't have anything. Do you have anything urgent, Carl?
No, I don't, Chair.
All right, thank you. Public questions, any received?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. On to minutes, to confirm the minutes of this committee's meeting on the 4th of November, which have been circulated. Can I sign those as an accurate record? That looks good. Thank you very much. I'll do that and pop them in the office tomorrow. Okay. Moving on to item 6, minutes of other meetings referred to the Community Services Committee. That's the minutes of the Allotments Working Party and the Youth Engagement Working Party. Do the people involved in either of those want to add anything to the minutes? Anything to raise, any points? Or can we just receive them? All okay, receiving them? Thank you very much. Okay, now on to item 7, the officers' reports. 7.1 on page 19, sorry, 9 rather. Anything to add to that, Carl? Do you want to take us through?
Yes, please, Chair. So there are the 2 amendments to page 11, and Phil will correct me if I've got this wrong. So the replacement allotment fencing tender is now going to, the recommendation is that that's put back until June. So we're going to give you more clarity on that under the item when it comes up later on.
Okay.
But the allotment fencing will need to be delayed. And in replace of that, we are looking to bring to this committee the Christmas lights tender in the March meeting. So that'll be a straight substitution, tender for tender.
Fencing for lights, or lights for fencing.
That's it.
Okay. Right, any comments from anybody on the forward planner, or the tracker rather? No, doesn't look like it. Okay, so the recommendation, which is on page 9, 2.1, note and approve subject to any comments and amendments which we've just received, the forward planner. And then 2.1.2, the resolution tracker at Appendix B, and approval of those resolutions marked complete. Everybody okay with that? Thank you very much. Right, now move on to 7.2 and the budgetary control, starting on page 15. Now, obviously, we've been affected by the COVID situation and the reduced commercial income, etc., which we've looked at previously. Do you want to take us through the numbers, Carl?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So there are just two points I'd just like to make and then open up to questions. So the first is that, as you'll see in paragraph 3.12, there is an adverse variance on this committee's budget at the moment of just over £2,000. And this relates to some urgent health and safety tree works that had to take place. So this committee will know that you've heard me say before that we have a proactive approach to our tree management. So we undertake surveys and carry out work. However, in any extreme weather, be it wind, snow or rain, we always have tree works to carry out. So that's hit us quite hard on the tree work budget. So there is an adverse variance in terms of this committee. However, it's worth noting that the overall council position is a favourable position at this current time. So that adverse is more than made up for the wider budget across the Corporate Policy and Finance Committee area.
Right, and I suppose I should just remind us on page 18 that the red items are good, whereas normally red items in budgets are bad. But because of the funny local government accounting practices, that's how we end up with being the wrong way round, as it were. But doesn't look too bad, does it? Carl, your comment on 3.1, 3.12. If we know we're always going to get some tree works in the future, is it worth building a sort of like a contingency reserve?
Yeah, Chair. So we've got a fairly healthy tree budget. So as it stands, it's £50,000. So on the face of it, that sounds quite a lot. When you think in the context that we have, a significant tree stock, you're talking of thousands and thousands of trees. £50,000 doesn't often go very far. So the way it broadly works is we carry out 3-year health and safety surveys. Now, Phil might correct me if I'm not quite right on this or add to this, that what we often find is in year 1, we have the bulk of the work that has to be carried out. So, if we take the year that we've just had, or 2020, we quickly spent our tree budget because we had year 1 works to carry out. So what we'll then see is, hopefully the idea is that in years 2 and 3, you might not have as much pressure on the tree management budget. So what we have tended to do historically is that in the years, if there are any, where there's an underspend in the tree management budget, we've looked to earmark that at the end of the year in order really for this committee and ourselves as officers to have some flexibility to deal with any overspend. So the real pressure would come, Chair, if the budget for tree management was to be reduced, because that would straight away, we would be in the position where we would still carry out health and safety surveys, so we would still identify the works that needs to happen, but we would have less ability to put right known problems, if that makes sense. So, but we do try to earmark where possible, where the funding is around.
Okay. Are you sort of referring to things like that sooty bark stuff and all those other diseases? What was it? The moths and something else I've forgotten.
Yeah, that's correct, Chair. So the sooty bark disease was the disease that to our sycamore trees caused by grey squirrels. So we had a big issue around that probably 2 years ago now, which is kind of scary how time flies. But you're also correct in that oak processionary moth is now well and truly outside of the M25 area. We've had a couple of cases last year, and we will be seeing more cases in the future, that's for sure. But the big change to flag on that to committee is that historically one of the national government agencies, I think it was the Forestry Commission, am I right, Phil? Is it the Forestry? Yeah. Yeah, so Phil's nodding. So the Forestry Commission, when oak processionary moth wasn't that common, they used to carry out the work on behalf of any landowner that identified it and pay for it. Now, unfortunately, as it's become more common, they've decided to change their policy to say, you've got to put this right. And by the way, Gov, we're not going to pay for it anymore. So again, that adds pressures that we don't expect. And there are quite strict measures you have to put in place when you identify a nest as well, because of the public safety concerns.
Okay. All right. Anybody else have any comments on the report? No. Okay, then I think we're just noting this. That's 2.1 on page 15. Is that okay with everybody? Thank you. Now moving on to 7.3, the residents' tree planting guide. I mean, it looks quite good to me. I learned a lot from that, which I didn't know. Can I ask anybody for any comments on it? Councillor Priggan first, and then Councillor Cowley.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's brilliant, actually. I think it's a really good good guide. I just had two questions. One of something that I always do wrong. It specifies what type of soil do you have. Is there anything, like, we've all pretty much all got clay? I don't know if you've all got clay, but the clay here is pretty bad. Would it be worth, given that Harpenden is so full of clay, to have a recommendation for particular trees that are good with clay? Because I have killed so many trees in my life, or plants in my life, and spent so much money on things that died, that might be helpful for people. I don't know if that's at all possible. I don't know, Carl, if you can just take that away. That's all really. And the second point that came up once, I think, was if there's any funds available for people to plant trees. I don't know, I didn't see that. I don't know if that's something we want to mention or if that even exists. It's just something that we fleetingly discussed during a meeting in the past, that you potentially as an individual could apply from, like, the Woodland Trust or something, for funds to plant a tree or a collection of trees. I don't know if I made that up either. Thank you.
So, Chair, I could take both of those points away, and I can certainly get the information regarding what trees are best with clay soil included. Regarding the funding, I can get that researched, and if it does exist, we can get that included. I don't know the answer at this time.
No, me neither. Thank you. That'd be great.
Okay, Councillor Cowley.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a question about how we were going to make residents aware of this. I assume that we'll mention it in forum at some point, but I was just, in terms of it mentions it's being printed in-house, I was just wondering, are we sending people copies or expecting them to come and pick it up? I was just curious.
Chair, I think the answer to that is that we will, of course, use the digital platforms in order to publish it. We will get some printed. At the minute, obviously, the information point is closed, but if people were to contact us who require it in paper form, then we can issue it to them in that format. And it may well be, depending on how things develop regarding the current pandemic, there may be other places that we can put them, such as the library.
Okay, Councillor Scriven.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question regarding, again, the soil types, as Melanie pointed out. It does suggest to undertake some simple soil tests and plant species accordingly. I just wondered if it was worth perhaps adding in there a link to where you might begin to seek soil testing services, because I don't know if it's something you do yourself, but I just wondered if that might be of value, particularly on digital versions where you could literally just click on the link and follow it through. I think people tend to go for the easiest route to information.
Chair, I'll get that looked into too, and if that can be included, we will do so.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions or points people want to raise? Okay, looks like we're done. So the recommendation on page 19 is that we consider and comment on the content of the draft residents tree planting guide at Appendix A, which I think we've done. So do we need to vote on that, Carl?
Yes, Chair. So I've just noted that there's an error in that recommendation, so we're asking you to approve it as well.
Yeah. Okay. Approve that. So all in favour? Thank you very much. It's unanimous. Right, moving on to 7.4, which is the replacement of allotment fencing tender specification. Are we going to agree the specification, Carl, or are we just going to defer this item?
So, Chair, so the plan with this item here is you're going to approve it this evening. There is a change to the timetable that will see the tender. Essentially, one of the key things with this tender is that we need to meet people out on site to talk them through the specification, and obviously we can't do it at the moment. Not legally can't do it. So we're having to delay the launch of this in order to at a point at which we can actually meet contractors on site. It's always beneficial for us to do that, for us to know that when the tender comes in, we physically know that someone's been and had a look round and it's accurate. So the only change that you're looking at here is a change to the timetable, which will see this come back for approval in June.
Okay. So just for everybody's benefit, obviously this will have been through our lawyers and we're compliant with the public procurement rules and all that sort of stuff. Yes?
Yes, of course, Chair.
Yeah. I just wanted to sort of emphasize that point. And are we okay with the scoring, the 80% price, 20% speed of delivery? That's on page 38, point 13. I mean, that seems okay to me because, you know, it can't be urgent, can it? Really? I mean, it's just, you know, standard sort of time frame. Anybody got any points they'd like to raise on the tender? Oh, it all looks, it's all quiet. So, okay, so we're asked to approve this item. Are we all in favour of that? Yep, that's unanimous, Carl. Now, moving on to 7.5 on page 71, the Lydekker Park Management Plan. Do you want to say a few words about this, Phil? Introduce the item.
Yes, Chair, thank you. I was just about to say that it's an updated management plan. We had a previous management plan. This one's a 5-year plan, 2021 to 2026. We're asking the committee to consider and improve this renewed updated plan. The park currently has the Green Flag Award. Works of note that have happened in about the last 15 months have included the complete refurbishment of the pond and the fact that it's got a lovely new sign, wooden sign at the front of the park now.
Yep.
You'll probably note that things like events are to be added into the plan later, but that's again inhibited a little bit by COVID-19. We're a little bit delayed getting that in there, but they will be added. But yes, you're asked to consider and approve the plan, please.
Yes, I mean, I think this park is a, yes, I'll come on to you in a second, Councillor Priggen. I think this park's a very valuable asset for the town. Having been mayor twice, you know, I'm familiar with, I think I opened, did I open the new, the bridge and the pond area in my last term, which was good, very well done, I thought. The Teddy Bears Picnic attracts an awful lot of people. It's a very, very popular event. And I didn't realise that the gates were locked at night, which I think is quite important to avoid, you know, antisocial behaviour. So all in all, I thought it was a very good report. But does anybody else wish to comment? Councillor Priggen?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, no, it's great. First of all, I think we went today on our daily exercise to visit the pond, and it's really nice. It's really lovely. There were actual ducks, so we spent some time looking at those, which there had never been before. This is my closest bit of green space. So I think that was really happy making. On the downside, it is my nearest bit of green space. It's the nearest bit of green space for a lot of people. And I always find that there is very little to do in it. It's just a little bit of green. It's like a garden. And I was just curious as to, I'm not saying we have to, but had it ever been considered to put a little bit, not big, but a little bit of play equipment in, especially maybe for very young children, who you could then have a little outing on your way into town to see the ducks and to go on a little baby play equipment stuff. Has that ever been considered, or I'm just curious?
Chair, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know whether any of the councillors that have been here longer than the 4 years I've been here know the answer.
We shall consult our oldest member,
Who's that?
Bert, who's been here longer.
I mean, is that something we would wish to consider exploring? Because it really is. There is really nothing to do in it. I mean, maybe other people think differently, but I wouldn't suggest that let's put a football goal in, because it's not that sort of space. But it is actually a real shame that you've got this bit and people walk through it and then move on. Like, there's nothing to do. I think I made my point. Anyway, that would be great. Thank you.
Chair.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chair, just a couple of comments. So certainly it's not something that's come up in my time here. I do wonder, and I'll need to check this out, I do wonder whether there's any restrictions on introducing a play area in relating to the original gifting of the park. I'll have to check that out. I would also just flag that sort of town centre parks like that, where they don't already have play equipment, can be very challenging in terms of planning permission. Can be very, very challenging to get the right permissions in order to install something when it isn't there already. But we'll check the first point as to whether there are any actual restrictions, and perhaps report back over email in between meetings to the committee.
Okay, that sounds good to me. Councillor Custon.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say that if there was something, and I agree that if there was something kind of young children, toddlers would seem more appropriate, that it might help with our car parking revenue. Because like if I was driving into town, you know, with my youngest, it might then be a bit of a draw and a little reason to go that, well, you know, from where I live, that far the other end of town, which I know it's not that far, but you know, it's another 10 metres on. So it might just be a draw for our car park.
Okay. Okay. All right. Any more points anybody would like to raise? Okay. So recommendation, page 71, 2.1. Committee is asked to approve the management plan for Lydekker Park, which is set out at Appendix A. All in favour? Thank you very much. Right. Now on to 7.6, page 117. Batford Springs. Again, very comprehensive report. I should think, I mean, do you want to raise your point, Councillor Hill, on this as we start off?
Okay, yeah. Yeah, this is something that I'd raised with the town clerk and councillors before the meeting. So this is a really good report. I mean, it's comprehensive in everything, but there's just well, it's just ongoing. One concern that I've had, you know, over the last couple of winters is the state of the paths, and I just thought seeing this management plan, it just seemed a good time to raise it again. I think particularly the section of the paths by the play area and where it goes over the footbridge and the sort of tarmac path there. I think recently it's had, you know, we have had really bad weather, and I think we've had more people using the path than we would usually, with people being out and about a bit more maybe. And yeah, so I just think that I'm just a bit concerned where somewhere it says the paths or sort of all weather, and I just feel like recently they've not quite been holding up to perhaps all weather as much as we like. I think the problem with the current path, it's kind of like, it's quite soft. And I think if we get flooding, I mean, you might be able to explain this better, but I think we get like, is it gravel or stone? I think if we get a bit of flooding, it might sort of wash away the top. And we kind of get like a sort of, we're left with kind of like the mud base, which is quite susceptible to mud, really. So I just kind of think, and I appreciated, I didn't spot this first time I read it, but there was somewhere about, you know, I think the Commons and Greens officer was going to do some further research into how it can be more accessible for people with disabilities, in particular, which I think is, you know, would be really welcome. So yeah, I just think over the period of the management plan, I think that we should look at how we can make it more accessible, particularly the paths, so that everyone can use them without getting muddy or having to push a pram through or something like that.
Okay, thank you. To comment on that one, Phil, I mean, I went down there recently, and the paths that you could see from the asphalt path, particularly to the south of the river, you know, where it sort of like runs along to the meadow and the ford, that was extremely muddy. It's difficult to know what to do about it, I suppose.
So, Chair, Councillor Hill makes some very good points there. In the time that I've been with the council and just before I arrived, I think Harpenden Town Council have made some extensive improvements to the paths within the Batford Springs. But there is one of the reasons that we have brought forward the management plan now and renewed it now is because although it wasn't due to expire until next year, we have made the observations that actually, because of what nature has done to it in the time of the plan so far, it has been necessary to update it. And things that we have in the pipeline, in addition to the bit of path that, or outside of the bit of path that Councillor Hill has just mentioned, the path across Marquis Meadow, we have recently had the contractors back to look at that. These are the contractors that did the works in 2016. And we made some observations about the condition the path is currently in, and they have agreed with the representations that we have made, and we are making a bid within next year's budget, or I'm making a bid within next year's budget for a small amount of money to redo the whole path across Marquis Meadow at a considerably reduced rate. In other words, all the labour will be free. So that's one path improvement that we're hoping to do this year. Another reason that we updated the management plan was because the area in the centre, I call it the centre of reserves, but to describe it, it's the area between the River Lee and the Chalk Stream near the play area. It's got the weir and the stepping stones at one end, and at the other end of it, it's got the footbridges that go through the centre of the reserve. That area that's bounded there, we at one point had aspiration to resurface the paths there, but our observations over the last year and a half or two have indicated that any works that we do down there are likely to be wasted and very, very quickly washed away by the floodwaters that we've been experiencing several times a year. So that's why at the minute the management plan is proposing a new approach to actually make that accessible. The area along from the ford, coming from the ford back towards the play area, I've been down there in the summer of 2020, and there wasn't any path that wasn't underwater. The water was almost to the allotment fence. So that takes quite a battering itself, and that battering is coming from the huge volume of water that travels down the River Lee. So that's another challenge that is posed. I think that the town clerk, from a discussion I've had with him, he suggested that we review the approach to that, to what we do about improving the area of path that Councillor Hill is talking about in the near future.
Yep, I agree. Councillor Lineker.
Vicky, you also were mentioning in the report about diverting the path at certain places, and I wondered how that would work.
Sorry, Chair, that Councillor Lineker, are you saying it says in there about diverting the path?
Oh, page 129, last paragraph.
I'm almost there. I was actually still on the allotments pages, nearly there.
I suppose it depends whether the path you're referring to is an official path, rather than, I mean, if you walk from Marquis Lane over the bridge, you can continue on the asphalt up to Lower Luton Road, or a lot of people walk off to the left or off to the right, where they've created footpaths. The thing by, you know, custom and practice. Yeah, Phil.
So, Chair, I'm grateful to have been pointed in the right direction of the correct paragraph. What that's referring to is there are areas I can think of a couple of examples on the path from the central footbridge that runs next to the chalk stream going towards the church. There are a couple of areas on there when the reserve floods, the path gets quite deep in water there, and on those particular places where that's happened, that's where we'd be looking to put a small diversion just to avoid the flooded area. Yeah,
I mean, I think the only thing to bear in mind with this is, you know, that whole area is actually a floodplain. You know, so therefore it floods from time to time. You know, that's Carl.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was just going to make a couple of points really, and that first one there relates to it being a floodplain, and I think one of the reasons why this has been brought forward is because we need to recognise that any work that we do in the nature reserve needs to be mindful that it's a floodplain, and so that we don't waste money on pathways or surfaces that are just going to get washed away within one winter. But also that in knowing that it's a floodplain, we actually do things that can make it more accessible all year round. So the suggestion of introducing a boardwalk structure to other bits of the nature reserve, you know, is a way of countering any flood issues. The other point I just wanted to make really was just a more general point around the finances and the aspirations of the management plan itself. So all of our management plans are very ambitious documents, and they set out a range of different initiatives that we believe are all essential in order to maintain the assets to a high standard, deal with health and safety works, but also, as many councillors have mentioned, making them as accessible as possible. However, we just need to be mindful that in this example of Batford Springs Nature Reserve, the budget of £32,500 is quite modest in the context of all the improvements that we want to do. And I'll give you an example. The new wooden posts that are along the Lower Luton Road to stop the car parking, which look great and will stop the problem, they cost £14,000. So just to kind of illuminate how much things cost and to compare that to the budget that we've got. So I guess the point in here is that that budget is already modest to deliver the things that we've got set out in the plan. It's doable, but it's doable because we plan our work over a 3-year cycle or over a period of the management plan. So for example, we look at our initiative and say, we've got £32,500 a year for the next 3 years. So how can we profile what we do over that period? So there is a risk that if budgets were ever to be reduced, it would significantly reduce our ability to do stuff. And the final point that I would just like to make, Chair, is the suggestion to Councillor Hill and yourself by email today, and we can't do this right now, but one of the things I think that would be really beneficial when we can do it is to host this committee down on site, just so that we can walk you through firsthand the issues and the challenges that we've got, because we can put them in the report, we can show you pictures, but actually sometimes it's only when you actually see the implications, and if we can get you down on a rainy day, even better, but that might be stretching it. But if we can get down at a point when we're allowed to, we would really like to walk you around and show you some of the challenges and you know, the important work that this management plan will do. And Chair, sorry, there is one more thing. I'm thinking about it. We have secured some funding from County Council in order to repair the stretch of pathway from the ford that runs behind the allotments. So if you've been down there, you will see there is significant erosion, and some of the work that was planned as part of the new school enablement, we've been able to get the county to reallocate that to improving that right of way. So to illuminate the kind of the problem there, I had a very thankfully a resident who found it extremely hilarious, or at least his wife did, just before Christmas, where they were walking along down there. They stepped on the husband stepped on what he thought was a puddle, but actually it was a 3-foot drop into the river, where the water had gone over the top. So as I say, thankfully the wife and him had found it very funny, but it does kind of illuminate the problem that we've got down there. And that sort of health and safety work, once we're aware of it, it's very difficult for a council to ignore it. We can't know about a problem like that and not deal with it. And so again, that stretch of pathway, you're probably looking at around £10,000 to £15,000 worth of investment. So you know, things cost a lot of money, unfortunately, across our management plans. So the budget really is quite modest.
Okay, Councillor Hill.
Yeah, thanks, and thank you for that. I thought that was a really helpful answer, and Carl. When you just mentioned health and safety, it just sprung into my mind about the stepping stones. I know there's a sign which says you don't go over them when the water's above the stepping stone height, but I mean, are they commonly used elsewhere? Because I've sometimes looked at them and thought, you know, I've not really wanted to walk along there thinking it's a bit dodgy. But is it safe? Is it common to see them everywhere?
Yeah, so Chair, unless you want to start off, Bill, but I've got a couple of things I can say to kick off, and then perhaps you add in. So I'm not sure whether it's common. It's fair to say there are, if you had a panel of 6 environmental officers and you asked that question, you'd probably get a big split as to whether stepping stones are good in a river or not good in a river, and you'd get lots of different answers. So there are many people that are minded that stepping stones like that cause problems to water flow, and they would remove them. And there are others that say actually it's really important for lots of other reasons. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's common. I think we've got them, and it would be very difficult to ever get rid of them. What we do is whenever we anything around water, we have to carry out periodic water safety reviews. So the outcomes of those safety reviews vary in terms of measures. So from the very basic of we get advised we have to put signs up, through to we have to section off areas, or we have to carry out essential work. So we will get regular surveys undertaken on the stepping stones. And I think if the wooden beam kind of sleeper bridge that is in the report, that's recently undergone some repair. So we do carry out that sort of work. And just linked to that, we have got some big issues of erosion around some of the edges of the river down there. And they're down around the areas that we see children and young people utilising in the good weather. So it's areas that we would never want to section off from members of the public, but we do need to do something with that long term in order to make it more accessible and safe. So again, our team in-house just before Christmas, sometime before Christmas, identified a big hole, a 2 to 3 foot hole on an area just to the side of where children walk along and play along. And so that was quickly filled in. So again, just to bring to life some of the live sort of day-to-day health and safety things we have to put in place, even before we're looking at all the other nice improvements to pathways.
Okay, any other comments? Councillor Priggen.
Totally different question. As part of the introduction, it mentions Harpenden Town Council, this committee, the Batford Springs Volunteers. Just curious, was there not a working group as well? Has that been disbanded? Or is that still going on and just not? Yeah, just curious. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, the Harpenden Town Council's working party for Batford Springs does still exist, but it hasn't. There hasn't been an urgent need for it to take place during the pandemic, so there hasn't been a meeting for quite some time.
Okay, are we all done? Okay, in that case, can we move to the recommendation on page 117? Committee is asked to approve the new management plan for Batford Springs Local Nature Reserve, which is set out in Appendix A. All in favour? Thank you very much. That's unanimous. Now, moving on to I think the last item, 7.7, page 183, and this concerns the Brownies flower bed outside Cafe Nero. Carl, are you going to do this one, or Phil?
Chair, just quite simply, the committee are being requested to approve a plaque and rose for the Brownie bed. This has been requested by the Harpenden Brownies for a lady called Alison Kyle, who I'm informed was a Brownie leader of 12 years within the town, and she passed away last year. So the request has come in, and under our memorials policy, the committee is being asked to consider approving this.
Right, thank you. I'm in favour of this. One of the things that mayors do is sort of get involved with the planting of the bed. I can't remember what time of the year that takes place. Can you remember, Nicola? No, can't remember.
Chair, it's normally around May half term and I believe October half term. Again, interrupted by the pandemic over the last few months, but that's the normal times.
Yes, and they all seem to enjoy it. You know, I think it's a very good thing for young children to be involved in this sort of thing, take an interest in the town, and this flower bed's in a fairly prominent position. So I think it's a good thing myself. Any comments from anybody? Councillor Nicker.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's a good mark of respect for the lady too. I know she did a lot of work for them. Yeah, totally in favour.
Okay. All right. Any comments from anyone else? Councillor Scriven.
Thank you, Chair. Again, also very much in favour. Only one comment just on the photos. Obviously, one of the 3 plaques in existence is damaged. I don't know if that's been repaired, and if possibly if that's a recurrent theme, if there's a better way of securing them.
Chair, I'll look into that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cousin.
Thank you, Chair. Well, as the other speakers, I'm very much in favour. I just wondered, speaking up for the boys, for the sort of the Cubs and the Scouts, is there the equivalent for them anywhere, or is this just a historic thing that it just grew up with the girls?
Chair, I only know of a Brownies bed. I don't know of a Scouts or a Cubs bed in the town.
Councillor Pricken.
The Scouts have planted a tree on the high street, as I'm reminded very regularly by our group Scout leader. And there might even be at some stage another tree, I've been told. But there's also our primary school planted bed. So there are all sorts of community groups, I think. It's not just the Brownies.
Yeah, I think from the mayoral point of view, I think we seem to have quite good working relationships with the Brownies and the Scouts. You know, the mayor gets invited to, the sort of county Scout event and all sorts of things like that. But relatively few invitations, if any, certainly during my term, from the Girl Guides. I don't know why that is. Just no good reason for that. But Scouting is huge in Hertfordshire. It's thousands, and they could form lots more Scout troops if they had sufficient scout leaders. So, you know, again, I don't know the situation with the Girl Guides, because I didn't get invited to any of their events. That's just some background information. Okay, are we okay on that? So, recommendation, page 183, approve the planting of a new dwarf memorial rose in the brownie flower bed. Approve the installation of a new plaque of the same size and design of those already in situ. Are we all in favour of that? Thank you very much. I think that brings us to the end of the meeting, Carl. I don't think we've got any exempt business or anything like that. So close the meeting at 8:17.
Thank you, Chair. Good night.